So we have Amake Kubat joining us. Welcome. We have Quincy Powell, Emmett Izard. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name. Please correct me. And Faise Ibrahim from Youth Prize. And we'll have Duaba joining us hopefully soon as well from Walk the Wild Path. So just to give a brief overview of our time this morning, each of the groups will be introducing themselves for a little bit, and we'll try to keep time. And then we will get into a series of questions that Cooley and I came up with for about 30 minutes or so. And then the last 10 minutes or so will be opening it up for questions with everyone. So let's see. Yeah, Amake, did you want to start? Did anyone in particular want to start? I know you had slides you wanted me to share. What would would you like to start?
Do you have the slides available, or I can
Yeah, yep,
just right? I
yep.
can
So I'll
talk
share
first.
my screen. Yep.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Amake Kubat. I went through the Nexus Black North Star Cooperative training in, I think, the second cohort, so it had to be around the 2018. I'm the CEO of Your Mama's House, which has a very interesting journey, and it's still in formation. Interesting enough, I did want a cooperative, but it turned out to be easier to get. Well, I can't say it's easier to get incorporated, but for the things I want to do, it's more of a hybrid model. So I want to put that out there right now. It's a hybrid model of a cooperative. We are a nonprofit that acts as a cooperative because that's just the way who we are. And I also did not want to replicate anything that was already out there. So that's it. So the story of Your Mama's House. Um, I am an artist and an educator. I was a special education teacher here in the Twin Cities for almost from 1987 and 1989 until 2013. And in one of our classes for ECFE, Early Childhood Education, I was doing a lesson on supporting creativity in young children. And I had about 20 mothers from everywhere. I mean, they spoke Spanish, Somali, Oromo, Hmong. We were a very good, diverse collective of mothers and babies. And as I was talking about where they can get supplies and why it's important to, let them do art and, whatever, I put a bunch of stuff on the table for the mothers to kind of look at, say, well, these are pom-poms. You mean I know pom-poms in your language, or this is glue and glitter. You can go to the Dollar Tree and pick up most of this stuff for $10. And just trying to get them away that this is very important. And your children are already creative. We just don't want them to go to school and it just kind of, they're not able to express themselves that way because there's lack of humanities and arts in our school systems at this point. So as I'm talking, I realize the mother's not even paying attention to me. They are like making stuff and they're knitting and they're making paper flowers and they're talking to each other and they're laughing and people are talking across in different languages. The interpreters are interpreting everything. They go, oh, I don't have an audience. What's going on? And they were like, we like doing this. And my mama used to do this. And my grandmother taught me how to do this. And this is how you do this. And they started teaching each other their skill set through their stories about their grandmothers and their mothers. And when they got through, they said, we want to do this again. We love this. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So if I created something like this, would you come to it? And so it was kind of tabled. They enjoyed it. I try to keep art as part of our projects, whatever we did every time we met. Went to OIC Summit Academy to do the community health worker. I wanted to know what that was and how was it going to impact our community. I really did not need to go to school. I did not need another degree or another skill set, but I went. And one of our assignments was to look at our community. Northside is where I live. Been here ever since I moved here from Los Angeles in 1987. And what is lacking? What was lacking is things for young people, young families with young children. You had the YMCA, but it was really for teenagers. You had some Oak Park. You had other places, but they weren't for little children, families with small children. So I thought, well, we'll build something that we could do art making and we can sit down and continue to tell our stories. So Your Mama actually happened when I just thought, well, what would I name something? Um, and I just thought, Your Mama. This is about your mamas. And that's how Your Mama was named. Next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? Or do I don't know how to do this. Okay. So I've already said all that. So, okay. I went to Summit Academy, OIC, and there was a woman I met that was an older woman, was literally pulling her hair out of her head. And it was like, wow, you're talking about anxiety and nervousness. And I thought to her, I said, we were one of the two oldest people in the bunch. We didn't know how to do computers. We were staying after school till like 6 o'clock trying to figure out how to do computers and how to turn things on and the click, clack, drop, scrap. We just didn't get it. So we were both nervous, both anxious, both feeling like, what are we doing? And I said, well, you're pulling your hair out of your head and I'm about close to right behind you. We need to do some art or something. And she said, I do art. Next slide, please. Okay, so she brings me this brown paper bag, and this is the brown paper bag she shows me. This 55-year-old woman who had a lot of problems actually would sit down and just paint on brown paper bags just to keep her anxiety at stick. And I thought, you know what? I don't think we're supposed to do community health. I think we're supposed to do art. And this is how Your Mama's House was born, is looking at what are the needs of women. This woman was couch surfing. She was 55 years old. Her husband had kicked her to the curb. She had no money. She had really poor health problems that were affecting her mental problems, but she was doing art to keep herself afloat. So I agreed to ask her, if you would make 100 bags, I will get you launched as a business person. And while you're making your 100 bags, I will finish my book. So from September to December of 2010. That's what happened. Next slide, please. What came to me as I was doing this was Fannie Lou Hamer came to me as spirit and started talking about how you get things done. And I didn't really know too much about her other than a civil rights activist. I did not know she had cooperatives. I did not know all the things that she did. She went through everything that a Black woman was going through in my life, the health issues, the violence, the chaos, all the things that, so she knew it. I mean, it wasn't like she wasn't born into this and it was some ancestor that we read about something. She was in my lifetime and we were having the same issues and the same problems. So I started researching her. What did she do? One of the things that came up for me was the 1929 Aba Market women's riots in Nigeria. First of all, it wasn't a riot. The British had moved into Nigeria and had really disrupted the workplace of women. The marketplace was the workplace of women. They controlled the marketplace, big, huge, like we have now. We have the open markets, and they would get out and sell whatever they planted or whatever they made, and people were pretty happy. The British come along and they want to tax them for what they're making, and the women are saying, so wait a minute, we're doing the work, it's our product, and you want to tax us for doing what we do? We're not going to do it. So they started not showing up in the daytimes in the market. They started showing up at the nighttimes and doing their market. So when you talk about Black market, you're really talking about the Aba market that the women did in Nigeria, where they just thought, well, we just won't show up while the British is up with their banks and their restaurants and their they're promenading through our land. We're just going to show up at nighttime. So that didn't make them happy. The British started putting people in place, gatekeepers, to start harassing the women. One man went to a woman and told her, I want you to count all your goats, your pots, your pans, everything you make, and we're going to tax it. And she basically said, I want you to tell your mama to do it. He got mad and hit her, and she beat the crap out of him. They also did something that women do today, is they do the signal. Um, they sent palm reeds to different villages, which means help, come and get to us. So 300 women showed up to say, okay, what's going on? And the British considered it a riot. These women had no weapons. They didn't do anything. And they were fired upon, but they were told that this was a riot. So this got my attention of how collectively, how smart we are, how powerful we are, but how that is seen as a threat and danger. So that started informing me, how do I look at bringing mothers in and empowering them, while with the discount of their free and seen and unseen labor, so which we have today. Women's work has basically been privatized. It's considered poverty work. It's considered not caring, not as good as somebody's out there like a male that's running the world. Next slide, please. One of the things that the mothers informed us was they were tired, they were exhausted. So one of the things we heard was how exhausted women were, and I thought, well, you know what? I don't ever get a chance to sit down. You know, as a teacher, you don't get a chance to sit down in your classroom. You're running around with kids and projects and paperwork. Um, Mothers come home and they don't get a chance to sit down. You got to continue to cook, clean, wash. You know what? I think I'm speaking to the choir here, and there are men who are also mothering and parenting. So I don't want to leave men out who do this role, because men do parent and men can be nurturing. So one of the things I asked for is I want a chair. So I'm sitting next to a person in a theater, the free theater, where we're showcasing organizations like mine that were not getting a lot of publicity. They were upstarting, and this man said he made different things out of found stuff. So I said, I think I want a chair. He sends me a blueprint, and this is the chair. So this became the Sick and Tired of Men, Sick and Tired Rocking Chair from Fannie Lou Hammer. And I was honored to ask local artists in the community to paint the chairs for me to have a fundraiser to try to continue to keep Your Mama afloat. I paid for everything from Your Mama from 2010 to 2018 out of my own pocket. I didn't take a dime from anybody. I did not want a grant from anybody. I wanted to make sure that this was rooted in women wanting to support what we were doing. So we have the first chair. The orange chair actually was painted by Shaka M. Kali, and the honoring the ancestor chairs was painted by Starry Fawn Hedges, the director for Gaia Democratic School. Next slide, please. And incidentally, about I think 10 rockers were painted for me. We sold, they all went for the fundraisers, and every one of them was returned to me because no one would take the money. The artists would not take the stipend, and the people said, keep the rockers. So I have been giving rockers away if I can find somebody to give them to. We did the Art of Mothering workshops again. Here again was the Chairs of Resistance. These were chairs that were donated to us by the Walker Arts, and we had community come out and just decoupage them or collage them at UROC. Next slide, please.
Hi, Yomake. So I can continue, but I just want to let you know you have about another minute or so before,
Okay.
since
All
I'm
right.
space setting right now. So we'll definitely share this out.
Okay. Can we
Yeah.
just go through the slides, and I'll make just a quick commentary.
Yeah.
Okay, we got into climate change when in February, I want to say 2018, we had kind of a freak ass blizzard. Nobody could find any of the kids. Nobody knew what was happening with the school. People were stuck at work. And I thought, you know what? If we have an emergency in the north side, are we prepared? So I started doing climate change and emergency preparedness workshops, which allowed women, mothers to make preparations for emergencies. Well, where do we go? Do we go churches let us in? Will the school let us in? Do we have neighbors' houses we can go to? Do we have the things that we eat? Can we survive for a day, 3 days, 4 days? And that was the grant I wrote that was able to do 100 workshop bags, emergency kit bags, and we did 65 bags for youth that were unhoused, basically at PYC. Next slide, please. I want to say that we out of 10 years worth of work, 4 women have become established as artists. Next slides, please. And in 2021, we bought a house. I was able to get. I was very lucky that a organization in California heard about my work, and they fought like heck to uh, legally. Cooperatives are hard to get money for, and what I was trying to do, since people couldn't understand it, couldn't get things to do. So Rita Keegan in London invited us in to come in and do a social fabric project. So each one of us got a square that she is putting on a coat. Next slide, please. We had there's Ethel's brown paper bags on a wall. A woman literally came up and took 2 of them off the wall and bought them. She said, "These are mine," and took them and bought them. So we do have some international artists there, and those are the 4. Those are the 5 people that have been with me for a while. Next slide, please. I think I'm almost there. There's a woman who took the off the wall. Next one, please. And this is some of the work that I do, and I think this is what sates me. What I do is I am Yoruba, and our way of looking at the world is you're born, you live in good character, you become an elder, you become an esteemed elder, you become an ancestor, you become an esteemed ancestor. As an esteemed ancestor, you are hoping to be reborn and become descendants. So it is circular. So that's what I do is I look at the cultural, my culture. I look at things I've been taught by other women, and I look at this concept of caring. To care for someone, to embody, it's our ecological system. It is normal for us as human beings to be connected to other human beings and all living things, and we need to understand that. And cooperatives are probably the best ways, I think, for us to learn that and to teach it to each other and just as a practice. Thank you. That was quick. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that was beautiful.
I'm gonna stop sharing now. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, Youth Prize. You all up. We have about 10 minutes or so. We can be flexible a bit. You all to introduce yourselves. Let us know if you need anything from us.
For this piece, is it just the intros before we go into the question?
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, here. I can kick us off with intros. Hello, everyone. My name is Quincy Poe. I am the Opportunity Network co-lead at Youth Prize. I'm also a strategist, but as it pertains to cooperatives, kind of where I draw my inspiration is the resilience and wisdom from my ancestors. I was raised by my grandma, and she kind of has always done like mutual aid or have collectively come together with other people in the community to make decisions, come to agreements on things, to create spaces for different people like myself, the young people and the elders in the community. And so kind of have had a sense of that growing up. And additionally, I find my motivation from the dedicated individuals within my community, such as my grandma, who are engaged in similar impactful work, collectively finding ways to shape the future for us and set the seed, sow those seeds or plant those seeds in places so that other folks can kind of come into that work. So that's a quick little snippet of who I am. Throw it over to Faise.
Okay, hi everybody. It's great to hear about more of what you're doing, Amake. My name is Faise Abraham. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Youth Prize, where we're currently running a youth cooperative home ownership initiative that I'm also working closely on with Emmett here, who'll introduce himself. Outside of Youth Prize, I'm also a poet, a writer, a songwriter. I play a traditional instrument called a karar. It's a traditional African instrument from Ethiopia. And I grew up in rural Minnesota, in Worthington, Minnesota, mostly in immigrant, migrant, refugee community. A lot of them for former farm workers in their own communities, and then started working in the factories in rural Minnesota. That's a big employer. I would definitely say my upbringing strongly shaped, like it laid the groundwork for me to embrace things such as cooperative economics because our way of surviving and taking care of each other and existing was based on like mutual reciprocal culture and care and everything that we did. So kind of similar to what Quincy is saying, it's like all the actions and ways of care that I witnessed growing up has kind of directed me down this path that I'm on now. And I would also say that even just doing the work of like art and music and songwriting. And then I went back to rural Minnesota after college to facilitate intergenerational dialogues with women in my community, just to understand what it is that they want to see exist and to build. And creating a cultural center was a big part of that, which has continued to influence the work that I do. So I'll stop there.
Cool. I can go from there. My name is Emmett Dysart. Glad to be here this morning with all of you. Working with Youth Prize through this cooperative program that we have going on. I have several other roles within Youth Prize. I'm not employed, just kind of doing contract work with them. I've been I'm a former member of the YAB, which is the Youth Action Board at Youth Prize. kind of a group of people that are coming together to just eradicate youth homelessness. That's something that's near and dear to my heart, having been homeless as a youth before. I went to Augsburg University um, and created my major there, which I'm still in the process of obtaining, but it was social entrepreneurship. I am a restorative justice champion. I facilitate circles for healing and trauma for folks that recently got out of prison at halfway homes through different partnerships I have with 180 Degrees and Restorative Justice Community Action, another nonprofit that does restorative justice work. I draw a lot of my inspiration for cooperative work from two people that I'll mention. One being a former friend who recently passed a year ago, a couple days ago. His name's Carl Lobley. He and I were working together on many different projects and co-ops actually, and I just want to uplift him and his spirit. And I was introduced to him through Mother Atum over at Cultural Wellness Center, and she's also another person I draw inspiration for in this work. In addition to all that, I also do poetry about living on the color line, and I love teaching children how to play basketball. So I do that in my free time as well. And maybe we can move on to our second question.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves. I'm gonna drop that in the chat. Some of you all touched on it, but just to continue, may you talk about what drew you to cooperatives and collective organizing?
I could start with that. So I had participated in, I am participating in this role uh, as a fellow for the co-op project that we have going on for the housing co-op project. One of the reasons that I was asked to participate in that was because I had uh, gone through a class that the city of Minneapolis had conducted. It was called the CTAP. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with that, but it was an initiative that was born out of the BTAP. So that's the Business Technical Assistance Program that the city has. So that was made back in 2014, I believe, and in 2016, the CTAP class was birthed. So that's the Cooperative Technical Assistance Program, and basically that's like 101 on what co-ops are. They break down all the different models, the history of co-ops. And they really go into the rich history of what co-ops offer, because co-ops have been here since prehistoric times. And so just being in tune with the power that co-ops have is so important. And that's what drew my interest to being a part of this collective organizing in general. I can maybe pass it on to Quincy to speak.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. Kind of going back to what I was talking about before with my grandma, that's kind of what drew me to cooperatives originally, and just her fostering the idea of inviting people into our space to feed them, to fellowship with them, to think about the things that we needed in the community and how we can get those things together. It fostered something in me as far as a sense of solidarity, to create that positive and sustainable change within the community, which led me to partner with a couple of my brothers in community on idea to give back to young men in our community particularly, but to create a safe space where young men can go to get away from things that were maybe holding them down or maybe kept them stuck in a situation. And that could be a multitude of different situations, familial, gang. And so like we were connecting with a bunch of those different young men in different capacities. And what we realized is that we wanted to have more knowledge and expertise on how to really get in those resources to be able to effectively do it. And so we started a partner and join different conversations and started to reach out to different people to gain the expertise. One of the things that we did was joined the North Star Black Cooperative Fellowship as well, to start to really talk to the community, to foster that idea. Something we realized along the way, I will say, is that we needed more capacity to be more effective. And there were certain things that we needed after going through the process of having multiple conversations. And so we started to do cooperative work in different ways until we park that, until we can come back to it. So we're still having those conversations in small ways, but it kind of drew us to lean into how other people are doing cooperatives, to continue to learn about that, but also in different ways, try to partner with them so that we can grow and in the way that we want it, so that we can continue to foster that idea and make it come alive. But I would say it's really the community that draws me to it, because it feels like it's always been a way of living. It just feels like it comes natural, especially when it comes to mutual aid and how you show up for other people. It's just always been a part of my life, and so I feel like I do that in my personal life, but I also do that by work too. Is really collective agreements, collective understanding, conversations, and finding ways to show up for each other, whether that's through resources or just physically, and also through conversations and fellowship. And then,
Thanks, you guys. I can be brief. These questions are making me kind of go down memory lane to like think about like what has really influenced me in getting to where I'm at now. And I actually think I probably started to feel the need for cooperative economics as a high schooler. When my school, so we had a career day, which it's a very small town. There's not a lot of like careers, you know. So, there's different options. We could go see the newspaper office that writes newspapers. We could go to the local factory where people butchered and packaged pork. We could go to the courthouse. So it was not a lot of options. And I chose to go see the factory because I knew that there's no way you can see it unless you're working there. You have to work there in order to be allowed in. Otherwise, they don't allow tourists. So I was like, this is an opportunity for me to see it because I'm not trying to sign up to go work there. And this is where a lot of my family members have worked, and this is where a lot of the African community works. So I want to know what is it like in there for them. And when I took that tour, I just remember like everyone who signed up to go on that tour, we were horrified. We were just like, what in the world is this? And the youth who started that tour were not the youth who finished it, because a lot of the youth dropped off. Like as we went from floor to floor, we were like, we're done. I'm not gonna see any more of this. It was extremely clean, like super clean. There's a lot of regulations that around meat packing that make it heavily, kind of regulated because consumers don't want to get sick, especially after like The Jungle was written by Uptown Sinclair, is like a big book around the meatpacking industry, but the working conditions have gotten more dangerous over time. So it's gotten better for consumers, but the speed of the line moves really, really fast. And then the pigs are just like almost as tall as us. I don't know what they feed them, like antibiotics. I don't know, all the things that have gotten them to like the size that they are, and they kind of hang from the ceilings and they're on belts and they move them, and so you kind of have to duck, like so you don't get smacked by a big pig. And I don't want to like traumatize you guys with this description, but I stayed until the end of that tour, and the last part of that tour was the kill floor. And I just remember thinking like, this is not sustainable for people. Like this is causing disabilities in our communities because people are getting injured. And when they are done with this work, like they don't have enough to really buy a home, or like they have to like all live in one kind of space together. So it was just, I went to college with that in my mind. Like this isn't working for us, and they've cut the wages because the unions have gotten weaker. But they make like over 50 billion a year. So JBS, the factory in my town, makes over 50 billion a year. So it's like, why do all these people have to suffer if this company is making 50 billion a year? Like, does that make sense? It just doesn't make sense to me. And so when I got to college, I studied sociology. I actually started studying political economy, and I started learning about African political economy. So I started to learn about like economics written by African scholars and authors who've like studied the impact of economic policies on our own countries. So I started to learn like, oh, so we are being underdeveloped intentionally. And, you know, the things that called for foreign aid, they also impact us in a lot of ways we are not aware of. And then I got to work at Uganda's Women Entrepreneurship Association Limited in Uganda and Kampala, Uganda, where they were building capacity building for women-owned enterprises. And while I was there, I learned that agribusiness was like a huge issue for rural women because it conflicted with the way we do things culturally, like just how we naturally relate to land and each other and resources. Like it wasn't just like easy to be like, we're just going to assimilate to like Western agribusiness practices because this is, you know, because it was a clash in culture. Um, and then I also got to go to Mexico where I learned about the Zapatista movement. And that's when they started really saying cooperatives and like cooperativo. And that's when I got formally introduced to it as a framework, and learned about women running like artisanal markets and cooperatives together, indigenous women running schools cooperatively. And then I got to study Spanish in one of those schools for a summer. And that seemed more aligned with what I envisioned for my community. And we had to do like a final design project of like, what cooperative would you establish if you could? And I was like, what would it look like if rural Africans in Minnesota owned their own cooperatively run like butcher or farm and like packaged and sold meat in a way that was cooperatively done and that was safe and healthy for everyone. So that's kind of like, I think that kind of got me to this place of being more excited to take on this work at Youth Prize around building cooperative home ownership opportunities.
Great, thank you. And of course, yeah, Amake, the same question for you. May you talk about what drew you to cooperatives and collective organizing?
I have to say, first and foremost, those were not, that was not my language for a long time, cooperatives and organizing, but it has been my practice as long as I can remember, simply because I was one, a problem solver, and then I was also a dreamer. So I was always outside the box and thinking about things that other people weren't thinking, but somehow people would go, okay, what are you thinking? We know you think differently. So I knew there was a place for everyone to be able to think. I left the United States when I was about 18 years old and lived outside the United States for a while. So I missed all of the Black experience of the TV shows and all the upward mobility, even though my family's pretty much middle class. I wasn't there. I went to London, and it was in London that I met a group of people who were living cooperatively. They were squatters. They were, working with developers that had empty property and saying, like, let us stay here. And so housing was an issue, jobs was an issue, medicine was an issue, even though it's basically socialized there. And I learned to start doing things and would invite people to do it with me. It was simply like, why should I do this by myself? This will benefit everyone and everyone can come and do this. But I think when I listening to Vaishi's stories and listening to everybody else's stories, I was impressed by children's literature at a very early age. I could read before I went to school. And one of my favorite stories is Stone Soup. Stone soup has many varieties, but basically is a poor person or a hungry person or a stranger comes into a village and there's no food according to the village. So he goes, I'm going to boil this stone. It's going to be good. I'm going to have this great stew. And the curiosity of this man, obviously a fool boiling a rock, got everybody's attention. And he would just say, well, if I had an onion, it would be really good. So he kept saying what would make the soup better until finally everybody brought out everything within the bread and the wine and the cheese and a little piece of meat. And they had this wonderful feast, and they told stories, and they learned from him. He learned from them, and he went on. I feel my life is very much like that. There's a Yoruba phrase called the RA, the permanent stranger. So my life has been like the permanent stranger, going from place to place to place to place, kind of gathering these skills and leaving what I know there. In London, I opened up a free cafe. I mean, they just went down to the markets and say, you got anything that's not going to make tomorrow? And I would just make tons of vegetable lasagnas and pies and, of course, Black food. So red beans and rice. And, I started barbecuing. They don't do ribs there. So I found ribs are really cheap there. So I was able to get ribs like for 15 cents a pound. And I didn't have to advertise. Once I started cooking the meat, expatriates and Americans would smell it, and they would show up. So I basically built a business and started asking other women what could they do. So I basically always folded in other people with me and thought we could do better if we were doing this together. So I learned how to do living in houses with people. I learned how to take care of conflicts with different organizations, and we also did a travel guide where people would basically say, I want to get to India. What do you know about it? And people literally wrote on an index card and filed it under A through Z. And people would call up and go, I want to get to India. What do I do if I get to this city? And they would go, oh, you can stop and have tea at this place. That became Lonely Planet Journals. So those and this organization was called Bit Information, and it is like your precursor to Google. So I learned that if you get with people and you solve problems, and people can say, what my little brain cell helped do this, you can get people to do things. I mother. I did not have a mother, and it's interesting enough, that's what I do a lot of. So mothering other people, mothering mothers, has been a big thing. Looking at how to incorporate the pedagogy of the oppressed to people where they don't feel like, I'm going to be horrible, this horrible triggered person forever. Those are the kinds of things that were important to me, and I think formed how I look at things. Also, my traveling. I just went to Cuba and Honduras this year, and their whole concept of caring, Cooperative, is embodied caring, how to care for everything, and you see it in every little detail of everything that these people do. In Honduras, I was with Afro-Indigenous people who are fighting for their land. Everything that has been done all over the world by colonizers and conquerors is happening there. They're fighting like heck for their land next to the water that's been there for 400 or 500 years, and these corporations are kind of coming trying to push them away. They have made cooperatives to have everything that they can't have. Their Honduras has collapsed. So to have medicine, to have education, to have protection, people have to organize and do that themselves. So I learned a lot from there. Going to Cuba, who has had the blockade for 62 years, United States and Israel want to crush them. So they have done everything you could think humanly possible to a group of people. But the people themselves rallied under the leadership of Fidel Castro. And I'm not radicalized, but I do recognize somebody who's strategic and astute, that he said, he's a visionary. And he said, basically, our backs are against the wall, and we're going to unify as a people. And we are all Cuban, and this is what we have to do. And he said, I'm going to be heavy-handed, but this is what we're going to lay out. And he picked 6 things to look at: housing, land, energy, food, education, medicine, and those have been the focus, and those are the things that I saw and evidence as people in practicing of caring and taking care of each other and working cooperatively. If a car breaks down in Cuba, 5 other cars will stop and make sure that car gets back on the road. I'm sitting at a chair, and a woman getting water behind me helps me put on my sweater. I don't know her. I don't even see her face. I just can feel these hands touching me and helping putting my sweater on. And then she goes on about her way. That is a practice care of caring for other people that we don't have this point. So part of my job in doing this is re-educating. We have to talk about racialized capitalism. We have to talk about internalized oppression when women feel, oh, I'm just a mom. No, we're not just anything. We're first responders, and nobody else would be here if we weren't. If babies didn't come out of our bodies. So we're not just a mom. We have to look at returning to we, not I, but we. So those are the things I have learned, and those are the things that I definitely form what I try to do in my work. And it's a cooperative. And to me, it's just a way of living. It's not I can't compartmentalize it. It's just the way I am, and it's the way that people around me be that. And most of us are friends who decided we're better together, helping each other do things as opposed to struggling apart. I do.
Thank you so much. We have another panelist who's joined us, Duava, and I'm trying to add him to the, okay, cool, thank you. Duava, if you could just give like a brief introduction of yourself, aka Professor Duava, and then I'll ask a question to all the panelists about maybe sharing some challenges or some successes that you've seen as building your cooperatives.
Yeah. Hey, y'all, can you hear me okay? All right, for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. Um, yeah, so I got lost in the kitchen on the way to the Zoom meeting. But I'm here now. I'll be on screen soon. My name is Duaba Unenra. I use he, they pronouns. I am a founder member of the Wild Path Collective. We are a um, Black-led or Afro-Indigenous-led, but multicultural, intergenerational, interfaith collective of folks, um, as well as queer, trans, non-binary um, folks, poor folks who basically have the shared experience of in our ancestry being pushed off of our homelands and into cities and ghettos in the cities. Um, and all of us have a shared experience of seeking our way back towards connection with land. And all of us have a shared experience of having in this moment in time community members, kinfolk who also want to go back to the land, but because we haven't been in relationship with it and because we've been taught about going back to the land with um in some ways a white mind instead of going back to the land with a black mind or a native mind, there's a risk that we can hurt one another, as in like us people can hurt the land more and the land can hurt us more because we've been out of relationship for so long. And so our organization, we take care of 60 acres of land and 40 acres of water around the lake um, in Osceola, Wisconsin. And we hold down that land. It's called Lily Springs Farm as a place for our folks to come and get their feet in the dirt again, maybe for the first time in a while, and get reconnected with land, learn about how to regenerate soil and ecosystems and also regenerate culture. And from there, have that be a point of departure and greater connection with the earth for those of our folks in community who wanna be the first folks in their generation to go back to the land. Um, so that's a little bit about us, and I can share more as we go on, but I'm gonna pass it back to you, Nicole.
Thank you. I'm trying to spotlight the panelists again. So the next question is asking, maybe starting with Iamake, Duaba, then Youth Prize. Like, please share some challenges and successes that you faced while building your cooperative. And for the North Stars in the room, if you do have questions, we'll have time, but if you want to add them to the chat, please do. Sorry.
Okay, challenges. Boy, did I have a lot of challenges. It was very hard to really be clear to outside people who were interested in being funders or grantors or being part of it, what I was doing. It just seemed like it was just a total mystery that women could come together and do art for 2 hours or 3 hours and make something, and that was I guess worthy of it happening. But the idea of having to learn to speak in a language or having to learn to showcase what I was doing in a way that people could understand it would happen when I would just invite people to show up. But trying to write it on paper, I don't know how many Bush grants I have written. I don't know how many other grants I've written. They're like, we just don't understand what you're trying to do. It just like I don't know where people got stuck at. But the bottom line is I just kept plugging in and plugging in and plugging in. I learned that I also had to women when are giving the space and giving the time to feel safe to say what they need. That is something that has to be protected as well. So having people that go, oh, yeah, you can come and use my basement in my car in my garage where I fix my car or I have my pet snake was, they just couldn't understand that's not where I want to have it, or saying that, yeah, I need a space where we can make a mess. And women are pretty picky about making messes. Mothers sometimes don't want to make, they're telling their kids all day, don't make a mess. But you say, okay, we're going to splash paint all over the wall and we're going to roll around in mud or whatever. They just, they haven't had that freedom. They have not given themselves that time. Giving women 2 hours of free time without their kids, that was hard. Women just feel like, oh, I can't do that if the house is going to burn down if I'm not there, or I've got to do this, or they just need to sleep. So sometimes people would just show up and sleep. Making your mama, trying to be too many things for too many people with your mama was a hard thing as well. So having to pull it back in and say, this is we're going to keep centering art as a practice for mothers, for them to rest and them to be nurtured and them to be coddled. I feed mothers as well. I make sure they had nutritious food, and we tried, vegan food. I also hired local artists and local cooks and local musicians to help whatever. So if we had a ukulele session where for 6 weeks someone came in and taught mothers and daughters how to do ukuleles, and we fundraised for the ukuleles, and we gifted them when they got through. One child still is playing her ukulele 15 years from now. So that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but that's one child that had music. That was one child that was able to go home, and she defended it. She would go, no, it's not a guitar, it's a ukulele. Because people go, can you plug it in? So she was able to defend what her instrument was and how she proud it was. So those were challenges for me. The challenges was to do that. The challenge was to buy a house, fighting against my own bank, who did not understand what I was trying to do. So it was basic, a lot of education, a lot of advocacy for myself and for this vision. And my board, I have a fantastic board. We're really busy, so kind of sometimes like herding cats. But those are the things. And learning, the traditional corporations, but also keeping it centered that it is Afrocentric center, it's Indigenous African centered, and fighting for that is too, because people basically go, well, if you just do this and take this money and just do it this way, would be better. Yeah, but that's not the vision. That doesn't bring. I'm not leading anybody into a burning house, and I'm not bringing the Trojan horse into the village either. So it's that kind of having to be conscious and having to be aware and having to sometimes speak truth to power when I'm pretty much exhausted and tired of talking about anything. So yeah, those have been the challenges. Should I pass it on to someone else? Quincy, you want to take a stab?
I'll take a stab at that. That was there's a lot of relatable things that you said there. Okay. Something that I was thinking about too, for myself, just going back to how this has kind of been a way of life for me. A group of young people, were the urban 4-Hers at the time, we were younger, had came together, and we wanted to raise some money to go to Washington, D.C. to connect with other 4-Hers. And Minnesota, for some reason at the time, had never brought their young people outside of the state for that conference. And in fact, we didn't really have any money. And so we kind of came together to raise that money. But we started talking about youth violence as it pertains as the violence that was happening to young people. And that's really where the purpose came from as we drove the work. And we ended up raising money to go to DC, but we also went to Japan to kind of talk about this, because we had connected with a group that was doing some research on youth violence and violence against young people. And along the way, as we were raising money, we went to a couple of bigger foundations and funders, and a lot of them couldn't muster the conversation around youth violence, because a lot of them saw youth as the criminals and as the ones committing the acts of violence. And so they didn't want to give to this because they felt like the narrative was incorrect. And there was one point where we were in a meeting with a group of adults. And at this time, I was probably like 13, 14 years old, definitely not older than 15, but we had an adult leader that was working with us. We were in a room with a group of adults who had completely shifted the narrative, and they gave us this whole presentation and kind of told us that this is a way that we can get more money for it. And the youth kind of came together and just like, no, this is not what we wanted. And we left that meeting thinking that we weren't going to go to DC. We weren't going to get any funds, just because those were the people that we were hoping to fund it to mainly fund it. But they came back to us and they funded the project. But one of the ladies, I remember her saying that, you all are very powerful together. And we came in with a strong presentation and we were very convinced that we were going to change you all's minds. But it was the purpose that kind of drove that and kind of called them in. And so, like, the challenge, I think, is really getting people to see that the impact and the things that we're really navigating as a community and getting them to lean into that. I think they funded us because they wanted to. I think a part of that was saviorism, but the challenge along the whole way was like 9 months of conversations with this same group and multiple groups of adult leaders that supported us in a lot of ways, but didn't actually support us. In fact, every time we would tell them things, they would change our conversations to make it more appealing to the funders that we were going to be in front of and that they were going to go into rooms with us to talk to about this. And in the end, we really did stick to our purpose. And it was kind of hard because some of the youth dropped off. But I realized that we weren't really supported in our message and what we were trying to do. It was kind of like we were being used as pawns. And so like that has not left. That is still like, I think, very essential in the nonprofit sector and something we're still navigating today when we work with consultants and people to come in to be experts in certain areas. Even with Youth Prize, I think we have to continue to remind people like this is the purpose of why we're doing this work. There's always a pull to shift your narrative, a pull to shift from your purpose, a pull to shift just a little bit to fit the funder or to fit the person who can help you get over that cross line. And it's important to stick to your purpose because it's going to be hard and conflict's going to come up along the way. And there's going to be times where you just want to quit, you want to drop out. There was a lot of times I remember being a young person and angry crying and being confused and being told like, oh yes, this is the last meeting that we're gonna talk about this. And the next step is starting to plan the trip. And then going into that meeting and knowing that we have to have another meeting with multiple people and being a young person, understanding like what's really happening at the systematic level and doing so much of the work to get to the points that we were trying to get to and how we're still navigating a lot of those things today at the systematic level. But it's important to kind of stay true to that, but also to remind those that you're in the work with of the purpose and the goals and the values that you all kind of set forth, because that's really going to get you across that finish line. And it may not be something Faise and Emma that we're talking about is how cooperative work is kind of like, it takes years sometimes to kind of get to where you need to. And so it's not going to be like tomorrow. It's not going to be like a month from now. Sometimes it is, I would say. But a lot of the time it's not going to be there, but sticking to that is important because you're going to consistently be challenged on your purpose, on why you're in the work. And it's going to consistently be, people are going to consistently try to move that and to shape that into something that maybe it wasn't. So that has been my main challenge in doing cooperative work is collectively working with a group to stick to why we said we're a part of the work and not to shift from that, not to allow others to recreate our narratives for us, because that largely will impact the work that you're doing and how you're showing up. Okay, sorry, that was a lot. Throw it over to Faise or Emmett.
No, that wasn't a lot. And just to build off of that thought, like I had mentioned before, a part of the reason that I'm a fellow is to bridge the gap between the youth that we're working with and to just be that bridge for the youth and the adults that we're working with. And a part of that is like really being intentional with those relationships, right? Because in this work of co-ops, like it's easy for time to pass and for people to lose interest or to just get burnt out, right? And so like that in general is why we have to be intentional. The idea of having one-on-ones with members are uh, not only important, but they're necessary, right? And so when I was younger, before I even really understood what co-ops were, like my only idea was like the grocery store, right? Because we have here in Minneapolis the Wedge and the Seward. I'm just naming the ones over south. And so my whole upbringing with co-ops was just like, oh, it's just a a place where community gathers and they're able to um, sustain each other through working with each other through that particular model. And so like I'd get to know all of the grocery store clerks at the co-ops I work with, and uh, building that rapport with them, as well as at my credit union. It makes a difference in the trajectory of how that co-op is going to function, even as an outsider. Maybe not even a member of that co-op, just being able to like add um, to the whole thing through being that supporter on the outside. So I just wanted to like emphasize that getting to know each other and like being committed to that sustained relationship is important. And I will pass it off to Faisha for the next answer. If she like, oh, maybe she doesn't want to talk this one.
We can also go to the next question too, if it's a time thing, whichever works for you guys.
Okay, maybe hear from Duaba and then invite North Stars to speak. I know we're at time, so if any of the panelists needs to hop off, that's okay. I understand. Thank you so much for your time. There's so much in this conversation and we could go so much further. But hear from Duaba and then please, North Stars, if you do have a question, put it in the chat or yeah.
Yeah, there were three main challenges. And I think Make and you all from Youth Prize hit on two of the big ones. Like, people don't understand what you're trying to do, so they don't want to fund it. And then when people do want to fund it, they want to control it. And so Emmett, you were kind of speaking to those are like, to me, those are like the external facing ones. Because there's all of these folks outside of the cooperative who either want to get a piece or they want to kind of hate or see it fall apart or try to make it go the direction that they go without having to take the responsibility of being inside of it. And so then the other big challenge that is completely internally facing is like you were saying, is like keeping the group together. It's the single biggest challenge. And our elder who brought us together, his name is Louis Alamayu. One of the things that he said to us when he first called our collective together was, you all have to be really, you have to pay a lot of attention, because the moments when people begin to feel safe is when all of our like trauma and shit comes up, and we have to work through it. And in traditional corporations, or in typical corporations and capitalist ways of doing business, there is no place for emotion and trauma to get worked through, because everybody is in this performance of being busy and consumed with work and the urgency of day-to-day work. But we can easily forget that like a cooperative, a nonprofit, and a traditional corporation, the only difference is what the piece of paper from the Secretary of State says. Like, it's just a group of people at the end of the day. And if you're in a typical business where you're just trying to make money, like you're working for Wells Fargo or Best Buy or wherever, people don't care if they churn through you because they got another person that'll take your spot. But when you work in a cooperative, it's like in a lot of ways, your survival depends on it. And I think it's like Octavia Butler. I think it's Octavia Butler, but she said something like, you can't choose who you survive the end of the world with. And so what it means is that when you can't run away from people that you cooperating with, you have to be a lot more attentive to keeping folks together and working through trauma, working through beef, working through conflict. Like that the actual work of it, beyond providing whatever services that we do to community or products or whatever, is actually healing one another. It's like the most important aspect of the work. And without being able to attend to that aspect of the work, the cooperatives fall apart. And like in the chat, I'd said that, it takes a typical business 3 to 5 years for it to like really break even and start to fly from that point. And I said it might take a decade for a cooperative, because all of the people who are in the cooperative, the hope is that we're in like sustained and deep relationship. And if we don't know each other before we started the co-op, like how long does it really take for you to know somebody and trust them? It really could take like a decade for you to know the ins and outs of all of these different people that you're doing the cooperative work with. And all of us are going to change over time as we're doing the work together too. But if there's sufficient trust between everybody, we are a little more flexible in the changes that everybody are going to be going through. We can be a little more generous and graceful with one another as we're going through these different patterns that we have to work through. And without, just without being able to do that, the group is always at risk of losing the work. And so that's been the main thing inside of Wild Path. Like when we came together, we were like, we're gonna be on this land for 100 years. We are going to, and we set that number because we were like, it's probably gonna be another 100 years that it takes for this little colony that we inside of to fall apart. So our job as the first generation out here is to outlast the fall of the colony. And then all the young people that come through us or come to the land, they could take it and run with it from there. So we came together with the intention to hold one another through that time and to make practices to do that. And even with that intention, it's still very challenging. But it was important. It was important to me personally because in my ancestry, my folks are all from Louisiana. And after enslavement, they took over the land that they had been enslaved on and ran it in common. But the way the property system is set up in Louisiana is every time somebody dies and passes on their inheritance, they have to chop it up into parcels to all of their kids. And then if the kids start to have conflict and not work with each other, then people can just come in and buy it out from under you. So our family started off with hundreds and hundreds of acres of land that we have farmed for generations, growing sugarcane. And by the time I was born in the 90s, one of the former governors of Louisiana had bought it all up and turned it into a sugarcane company, or a sugar company off of the cane that we used to grow. So I came into the work of cooperatives because I was like, if nothing else, I want to be the person in the space who helps to relieve the conflicts that would tear the group apart, because it's the group dynamic and the cooperators cooperating that is the essential component of keeping the work going. And that's healing work. And we come into cooperatives to heal, not just to make money or to survive. So that's what I would share.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I just want to read a comment for Ian Market because I know she has to hop off from Claire and Amaranthia talking about, I just wanted to say, my mom and I run a grassroots virtual arts project for women of color, and we're deeply inspired by your story, really encouraged to keep going because at the beginning we had to fund things ourselves, finally finding our path and gaining support now after years of folks not understanding our vision. It's been rough, but your story tells us to never give up, so thank you. So I just wanted to say thank you, a verbal thank you to Ia Market because she said she had to hop off and grateful to hear from you. I know Liana was checking on time. I just want to do a time check for the panel to see like where you're at, if it's 11:45 or 11:25. 45, okay. 45. Seeing some thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay. I'm gonna give the rest of the time to the North Stars for like one maybe one question from the brilliance in the panel. So if anyone would like to come off mute, say hi and ask a question, now is your time. If not, we have more questions, but I just want to make sure you all have the space to ask from these amazing operators.
This question is for FaYise. I don't know if I say your name right, but what made you say it again?
FaYise?
FaYise. That's beautiful.
Yep, we got it. Thank
What
you.
made you decide not to go into like the meat co-op industry and decide to work with the youth?
So that's a good question. Because I did go back to my hometown after graduating to do grassroots community organizing work. Um, but I realized that developing an alternative, like everyone was saying, would take a bigger ecosystem of people, and it would take so much more work than was like kind of straightforward. And so for example, I just wanted to understand how did people feel about their work and what alternatives did they think was possible? Because at the end of the day, we all have the agency to change our own lives, and people have to buy into their own power to make that change. So even if I got this opportunity to leave and see an alternative and come back, that doesn't mean that other people want that alternative. So that's where I started those intergenerational dialogues, mostly with women. And what they were saying is that they wanted a cultural center. So not so much like another meatpacking plant, but they wanted a cultural center where they could run their own businesses, like whether it was stores, clothing stores that they make themselves or that their families are making from other countries that they import in, or to make a mural, to create a church. And so there's been a lot of development in the community, like people created their own bakeries and then they raised money to create a African church and establish a church building that where it's a resource for a lot of people. But it was like, I felt like it was a lot of like shared learning that we had to do. And then from there, we had a racial justice organizing cohort based in Worthington that leaders from different cultural communities were in that. And then they decided that they wanted to start their own nonprofit. So they created a nonprofit called Seeds of Justice that's run and led by individuals of color from Worthington, Minnesota. And they were like, we need funding, we need resources to sustain our community building effort to help make this alternative possible over time. So that nonprofit, I sit on the board of directors for that nonprofit, and they raised, I think they've raised over like $500,000 now for their work, and they're working on like building the community's vision of like what a cultural center could look like. And one of the things that they want to do is a research, like a community participatory research process where they interview youth and elders and to help kind of like design what could the center look like. Um, and now we're supporting them, like bringing them into, like I think we talked with Nexus about the consulting support that they have at Nexus and what they did for Acer. And I'm also trying to like connect them to folks in Worthington to see if that could be like a good consulting opportunity to support them. So it's just been like a multi-year, it evolves depending on how the community's leadership looks like and decision making looks like. And hopefully over time that would give them the power to create something different than.
Great. Thank you so much, Faise. I think one more question from the North Stars. Invite you to be brave and ask whatever you're thinking about. All right. Hearing none, I do have like a final question, and this is not a question that I had asked beforehand, so sorry about that. But just in hearing you all talk about your different cooperative efforts and where you're drawing this inspiration from, like what are some hopes that you have for the future in terms of your cooperative work? Like what are some things that you're really excited to see or discover or dive into?
I can go. I mean, I think for me, one of the things that we are working on with this youth homeownership cooperative initiative is getting youth and adults to work together and establishing what a youth-owned home ownership could look like cooperative. But so much of that is like equaling the playing field and getting resources and training and curriculum and information and resources so that those that have been kept out of the development process can be involved and also understand like what it all entails. And working with Emma and Quincy and the Youth Prize team to build that curriculum, I'm realizing like so much of this is not just relevant to this initiative, it's also relevant to like work in Worthington, Minnesota. It's relevant to communities all over to be able to get the necessary training, finance, and because that seems to be the biggest barrier so many times, like the administrative battle, and dealing with the government and the state and the city and all these codes. And it just, especially when, and there's just language barriers and access technology differences, and all of that just can put a huge roadblock up. So my hope and my goal is that so much more information become like common and open access, and that it's just more accessible and people are getting educated, and that there's just a huge culture shift where like it becomes common knowledge, and trying to build stuff and sustain stuff like this isn't strange because it's just a normal part of our culture. Um, and that that can also translate to the diasporas around the world that we're all connected to as well. And we don't see like development of our communities as the only option for us is to mimic like what's happening in the Western countries. And that's the only way we can ever have wealth, but that we can see the beauty in our own ways and our own cultures and our own ideas of prosperity that's not harmful to ourselves and each other. So.
I think I like to see maybe two main things. The first thing that I like to see in the next 10 years is a Black-led or Black and Indigenous-led land trust organization. So in the work of going back to the land and protecting land from basically if it were ever to get sold out from under folks, turned into like a Walmart or a housing development or a monocrop corn, soybean farm or something like that. There are things called easements that you can put on land that take it off of the private market and also can be used to put that land back into sovereign control by indigenous people, that can be used to put environmental protections on the land. But almost all of the organizations, nonprofits that hold those documents on millions and millions of acres of land are white-led. And it's dangerous for us because they don't have any accountability to Black, brown, and Native farmers. But as more and more of our folks come to the land, we will need Black-led land trust organizations or something more radical than that to help us provide like legal defense and environmental protections and honor treaties with Native nations about restoring access to land. So that's one thing. The other thing that I would like to see is the formation of like a funding agency for Black-led cooperatives that only funds cooperatives, has ample resources to support folks in starting off, and also building up organizations around what they do. Hopefully Solange will drop like $100 million check in Nexus's mail, and we can do that. But I remember when I had just gotten out of North Star, like I can't even remember how many years ago. My feeling was the same, like there wasn't much of an ecosystem yet. And yeah, it's hard enough to start a regular business, but to find other cooperators and then have to raise money for something that people might not understand, or even understanding cooperation is a barrier to funding some of the work. So I would love to see those things happen too.
Jump in here next. I'm share that exact hope as far as more funding, more resources funding training, I would say, emotional intelligence, professional development. I think too, because when we come together with big ideas, sometimes we don't know how to partner together and engage with each other to make those come alive. It's not that we don't want to do it, it's just that there's some strains there. And I feel like for the Black community, particularly as we try to engage in these ways, there's not a lot of support around how do we do this effectively? How do we do this together when conflict comes? I think conflict is going to happen. Sometimes you have to sit in that, you have to be able to carry that and then work through it. And so, how do you do those things? And so, I definitely want to see more resources in that way, because I think that, you know, folks have it, and in those moments, it's easy to lose it. And so, like, how do we hurdle over that? And I feel like when it comes to non-Black cooperatives, there are resources. There are those things that exist. And so I would love to see and also be a part of shifting that more so for our communities. I think too, I want it to become like more of a way of being versus on its own island. I think often it's on its own island when we can implement a lot of these practices into the work that we do, into how we engage just normally in our workspaces and our personal lives, and really lean into how do we help each other, how do we elevate and hold each other up, and then how do we find resources or things that are going to boost each other forward. I feel like for me, it's been natural, I feel like, but I think that that natural feeling too, I like to see that more, just because it creates a pathway to a very strong and multiple purposes, values, things that can be tangible for us to get to, and then we start to foster stronger relationships with each other. And I feel like these types of spaces has helped me be introduced to some amazing people that are doing amazing things, and have me thinking about how do we do this together? How do we go at it together? And I'd love to see that cultural shift, because I feel like, especially for the Black community, because I feel like it's often it's there in essence, and then it's taken away from us by different beings outside of our community, and sometimes just not as deep as or maybe there's not enough intentionality around leaning into that.
Emmett, did you have anything you wanted to add before we close out?
Yeah, I can keep it sweet and short for us. Back in 2018, when I had took the CTAB class at the city, I've always been like a visionary, right? Someone that's like has the future in mind, and like um, when I had took that class, like I just got my world shaken up, because I've always had this idea of what a business is and how it operates, and to have that model introduced to me, and to know that there's so many different options. You got the worker co-op, the lease co-ops. There's, you know, a dozen different ones out there that exist, and there's different ways that they function within each co-op or each model that they use, right? And so like back when I was introduced to co-ops, I had kind of came up with this idea with LC, my friend I mentioned earlier, that we could create a co-op of co-ops that would use all of the existing co-ops and the networks, and leveraging them all to uh, to truly you know, give back to community. So we had transportation in mind, food, education. There's so many different areas that carry a society, and when we think about how siloed each one is, because they operate for capitalistic commercial purposes, it just continues to oppress humanity as a whole. So personally, like I'd love to leverage this experience and everything that I learned to kind of make that vision come to life in the future. It's kind of been put on pause, but that's that's what I would hope to see from my experience participating in this. Yes, Carl Loden, yes.
Thank you so much for all of this. This was beautiful. I feel like we could probably have this conversation for days. There's so much brilliance in this space. May I get some reactions or some thank yous from the North Stars as our panelists hop off? And thank you so much for also putting some of your contact information in the chat. I've put the websites if you want to go back and revisit. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, so much love for all the work that you do. And hope you have a wonderful time and come back to North Star. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate you and your time.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So there was a lot to hear today and learn. I know I need some time to process. I'm not sure where everyone else is. We do have our break. We have a part 2 of this at 12:25 with 2 investment co-ops that are Minnesota based and then 1 artist co-op that is based out of LA. And so we hope to see you back at 12:25. But yeah, just take some time, drink some water, take care of yourself, reflect, and we'll be back for part 2 at 12:25 p.m. According to. And Jamar Smith. So this is 2 investment co-ops and an artist co-op. And essentially, just like this morning, each cooperative person will have some time to kind of introduce themselves, to talk about their work, and then we'll go into some questions. And so for the panelists, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. I'm going to spotlight you in a second. But yeah, you'll have some time to talk about your work. But also while talking about introducing us to your work, answering the first question, which is who do you draw inspiration from for your work? So I'll just add that in the chat and then spotlight you, and the floor is yours. If you want to start, go ahead, Johnny, and start. And then, yeah, we'll go to Alan.
Okay, yes, good evening, everyone. Everybody here from Minnesota?
Most. We do have a cooperative group from New Hampshire.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Hello, everyone. As Nakita said, my name is Jenny Seabury. I'm a small business owner. I own the Cavallo Travel and Tours, and also coming will be the Cavallo Travel Accessories. I am the chairperson and co-founder of the Unite Business Women Investment Group, and also one of the co-founder of the Brooklyn Minority Business Women. As we all know, we're focusing on cooperative. Yes, we do have the Unite Business Women Cooperative. It's a cooperative funded for a group of business women in the Brooklyns. That is the Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center area in Minnesota. We are located in the northwestern suburb. And the purpose of this investment group, it was to acquire commercial retail space. We're using our own money and investing in ourselves. We share the common belief that if we bring our resources together and invest it in ourselves, we will be able to not only build our businesses, but we will be investing in ourselves, building wealth, not only for ourselves, but the generation that will come after us, and also for our minority business community. This investment group, it came about 2 years ago. Group of business women came together, and we thought that it was about time that we change the narrative on the way we do things, looking at some of the challenges that we are facing. People don't believe and trust in our businesses, so they don't want to give us a space. So we thought that nobody could do it for ourselves, but we have to make that move. Our mission is pushing our businesses, utilizing our power and our investment to build our business for generational wealth. One of the things that really kept us going is having trust in one another and patience. Because when you talk about investment, people see you like, yes, I'm coming to make money. and going to happen just overnight. No. We made it very explicit to women that had interest that in order to make this work, one thing we have to have patience. That look at it as a long-term investment. It's going to take us 2-3 years to really get this going, and they all agreed to it. So there were people with like-minded that we brought into the investment network. So that kept it going. Hello, are you all here?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so that really kept us going. What we did to keep the investment group together and building trust, we did meeting twice a month. We started with Zoom meeting because remember when we started the investment group, it was during the pandemic, so we didn't get in contact with each other. So a group of business women coming together that we didn't even know each other. But we built that trust. We all were business leaders, and we believe that in what we were doing, that it was for our own good.
Mhm.
So we met, we did Zoom meeting twice a month. Through that, we were able to explain the process to all of the investors or the shareholders. We constituted our board members. And I'm the chairperson, and we continue to update members of all of our activity. If we get a deposit today, we share with the entire group that we have business X making this deposit today. So we kept people updated of all of our activity. We did that for over 1.5 years, and we met nearly 2 years after just organizing ourselves. After 2 years, we did our first networking meeting, and we came in contact with each other. At our networking meeting, what we did, we tried to educate people more about investment, why is it important, and why we should do this. So after we raised all of our fundings, we felt that we had enough to pursue a commercial space. While doing this, we know it wouldn't have been easy, so we network with a nonprofit group, ISER. ISER was instrumental in helping to guide us through the process. They have the business development manager who knew about investment, so we appointed her as our coordinator. So she was one of those who were part of our meetings and listened to us and helped guide us. So we were able to partner with them in doing this. So after so many meetings, after raising a lot of money, we were ready to go and we were instrumental in purchasing our first retail space. It was a collaboration. We bought the space with Acer. So we have our first property. It's not only going to be the first one. We decided that we will remain investors investing into commercial real estate for now. So I think I have shared information. Any question?
Thank you. So Jenny, we're going to do introductions first and then bring you in for questions. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, and congratulations on that space. That's really exciting. That all those women have been able to garner that much power and funding. I'm going to bring Alan into the space to introduce to introduce themselves, and then we'll go into questions if that's okay. So spotlight. All right. Hi, Alan. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Please introduce yourself.
Having you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be on this call with folks. My name is Alan Kwabena Frimpong. Kwabena being born on the Tuesday, the day of the river. That's the day of the Ashanti, the Akan people from Ghana, West Africa. So if you see my last name, my middle name, it looks familiar. It's like when you come here and you see like common names like Smith or, Johnson. Frimpong is one of those common names amongst the Ashanti people back in Ghana. But I was born in Newark, New Jersey. So I'm a Jersey boy from Brick City. I was born there. My parents are from there. And so I definitely rep the experience of both, of being someone of a next generation here in the States while also having roots back home to my people. And so I'm the co-founder, one of the co-founders of Zeal. Zeal is a worker-owned creative arts studio alliance. We have roots in Brooklyn, New York. Shout out to Brooklyn, on the land of the Lenape people. And I am here in Inglewood, California, where we also have roots with a studio practice here in Inglewood, California, on the land stewarded by the Tongva people. And Zeal, as a creative arts studio alliance that is worker-owned, we work as a Black arts cooperative. We really believe in the vision of creating spaces for Black artists to thrive. And it's with that vision that the co-founders between myself, Walter Cruz, who's an amazing artist, cultural architect in his own right, who really supported a lot of the work in the early years of the Black Lives Matter movement at that time. And then also with Phyllis Quento, who at the time was the assistant photo editor and freelancer at Essence Magazine. The three of us created that vision because of all of our experiences as creatives who saw the struggles of what it meant to be able to inhabit space and claim space, especially in the United States, where the rent is just too damn high, especially for creatives who, whether you dance, you sing, you write, we all know that we need studio time in order to create the beautiful works that communicate, touch, move, and inspire us to want to be better, do better in our society, and to really love and embrace ourselves. So our values are love, joy, grace, and abundance. And our mission is in three key areas. It is in creative talent development. How do we take those talents, gifts, and skill sets and really hold true to our values of who we are being in society? It's in our cultural production. So we're most well known for our cultural production around Who Owns Black Art. That usually happens in Miami once a year. We've been featured on the front page of the arts and culture section of the New York Times, Hyperallergic to name a few. And then lastly is in our creative placemaking. And so my background as an urban planner, Tia Oso, who's also the executive producer for Who Owns Black Art, as well as one of my co-pilots in Zeal, we both have experience in really attuning to what are the needs of a community and how can artists, creatives be central to the community development of a community so that it can economically thrive. And so in Inglewood, we've been a part of a planning project to look at what does the revitalization of downtown Inglewood look like that centers community wealth building. So that's who we are, and who inspires us is really the lineage of our ancestors and people who are part of the Black arts movement, right? And we think about 1971. If you see our logo, you actually see the 7 and the 1 in our logo. So it's a nod, it's a head nod to them. I think about the Black Emergency Cultural Coalition that also came out of that time, who was protesting against the Whitney Museum. So when we think about early stages of gentrification, we see that there. We also give a head nod to folks like Frantz Fanon and the Negritude movement, and having an understanding that while, yes, race is a social construct, at the foundation of that are formations about the ideas about Blackness and white supremacy really are indeed cultural. It stems from a very emotional, spiritual place. And so it's with those organizational efforts in mind and movement building efforts in mind that Zeal understands we stand on the shoulders of those folks, of our ancestors. And there are countless many other examples of art collectives such as Spiral, also coming out of the Black arts movement, that inspire us. I think for myself, as an urban planner, and then also as a conceptual artist myself, A lot of my inspiration stems from my lineage. I stay with the Dinkra symbol. This one is the Besasaka one, which is the sack of kola nuts. It means grace and abundance. I'm sorry, abundance and prosperity. And, I think there's so much about our people across the diaspora where we're constantly creating signifiers and symbols to express not only who we are and our identity, but also our politics. The Adinkra symbols were used as proverbial meetings to be able to establish governance. Imagine, we're using imagery to have conversations about governance. And we're all on the call right now talking about cooperatives, which are what? A space for us to practice business in solidarity, which is what? Governance, right? And so if we're thinking about democratic practice and control of means and of resources, and to be able to be cultural stewards, then what better way to express that than through symbols, you know? And I got my xylophone back here, which is called the Gili, which is in the northern region of Ghana. So a lot of my lineage really inspires and drives me to want to do the work that I do, because I think at many times I've been in space where, we've just had to suffer the trauma of being in a capitalist workplace. And I created Zeal with the other co-founders as a way to heal from that. And it's been a 5 long-year journey. It's actually short relative to other things, but I think the longness of that journey really stems from my experience of the relationship building with my other cooperative members, because it feels long. It feels like these are people I probably met in a different lifetime. But for whatever the reason, ancestors have chosen us in this constellation to be together in the same way that ancestors have conspired for us to be together on this call. So I really just thank, the folks here for being able to invite us and other panelists on the call, and just open to just being in dialogue and having conversation, and just, as we talked about on the prep call, just sharing ways that we can support each other through the challenges, because this work is not easy, but the work is worthwhile. So I'll leave it there, and just much appreciation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm adding you back to the spotlight. And I'm going to pass it to Liana to ask the first question. Well, the second question, I guess, but yeah.
Thank you. So may you talk about what drew you to cooperatives and collective organizing? And anyone can jump in. Yeah.
Is that a question for me?
For both of you, yep.
Okay, I will come in. What drew me to that work is, I would say, the strong African immigrant businesswomen that I saw in the Brooklyns. The women are so resilient despite all the challenges they are facing. They are still in business. During the pandemic, in a way, I didn't talk about my background, but I'm an accountant by profession, so I worked with corporate America for over 13 years before getting into business. I didn't know we had that much businesswomen in the Brooklyns until I started working for myself. I had enough time to move around. I saw that there were a lot of strong businesswomen in the community, but they were not given opportunity. They were housed in an office space, things that we call office space that consultants should be using. You're doing retail business, but you're not visible. Because they were not visible, I noticed that businesses were not growing to make that revenue. So those women really inspired me during the pandemic. I found out that they didn't even know about the resources that were available for businesses. I was part of network, and I started to get a lot of great information about resources that were out there. So when I was reaching out to other business women, they're like, "We don't know what you're talking about. Nobody told us." So that when I decided, hey, they established a network, I would set up a WhatsApp chat room where we share information and help people to get access to some of the resources that were available for small businesses. But again, this is what I found out, that our definition, the definition they have out there for small businesses, our businesses, they didn't even meet that criteria to benefit from some of the resources. So we're left at zero. What do we do? It's pandemic. But trust me, those women will stay in businesses. People will even take jobs just to meet up with their rents. Landlords took advantage of our immigrant businesses because they knew that most of us were ignorant to the laws or things that were happening. They took advantage of us and they were even asking for rent when the rent moratorium were rolling that businesses shouldn't pay rent at that moment. So that when I was able to bring those women together, and trust me, they didn't see me, we're just communicating on WhatsApp chat, but they were so excited and they were able to say, yes, let's do this, let's do that. So those women, I would say, continue to inspire me to really do my work. I enjoy what I do, trying to organize them and looking for resources that we can pump into our businesses to help us expand. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Alan, what drew you to cooperatives?
Yeah, I feel like similarly, I think given my experience rooted, with first and second gen African immigrants, but also just growing up similarly too in the community with Black people across the diaspora. I feel like in many ways my upbringing was already in a culture of cooperation. If I think about family as an initial unit of organization, so, my mom taught me a lot of values around giving and gratitude in my early years. And so I feel like by nature, I'm a very collaborative person. If I think about like mindset, um, I'm thinking about my own needs, but I think for me, I find my frustration whenever I'm doing it at the expense of other people. And so for me, it becomes very difficult for me to not to find mutuality and reciprocity in my relationships and my relationship building. And I think growing up here in the States, it can be challenging. I think given the nature of how people sometimes can be very individualistic and how they behave and very self-serving without maybe being thoughtful about the needs and wants of others. And so I think that was very foundational. My family upbringing, I think, was very foundational to me finding my way to the term, right, to the formal term called cooperatives. But I think many times we don't recognize that within our own experiences, we've had moments of what it means to collaborate and be cooperative that leads us to these potential opportunities to do business in cooperative ways. So I'd say that more formally, I believe as I became an adult, the work of the New York City worker cooperatives, the network, that they were very, very influential in me learning about co-ops. I think about the book Collective Courage. That has been another key book that has been influential in my understanding about the history of Black people and cooperatives. So I think about the Free African Society in the 1700s that was doing a lot of work to be able to garner the resources, the financial resources to free enslaved people, to reunite families, and to focus on the wellness and healthcare of not only just Black people, but also during the yellow fever epidemic, they were able to save many people's lives that even outperformed what hospitals and medical centers were able to do at that time. So a lot of those key archival, educational vehicles really did draw me to and also inspired me to create my own around my own needs, wants, desires, dreams in the work. I would also say I would be remiss if I didn't shout out the Malcolm X grassroots movement. When I was in New York City, it was actually my first time engaging with housing co-ops. So there's a lot of different points within my life journey that have informed my knowledge of and my drawing to wanting to learn more and wanting to practice what it means to establish cooperatives um, as a worthy endeavor of a business model outside of what we know within current economic systems of capitalism.
Yep, thank you both. So the next question is, may you please share some challenges and successes you've come across while building a cooperative work? We know that cooperation is not easy, it's hard. Earlier in our panel this morning, someone said that for regular businesses, it might take 5 years to develop, but for cooperatives, it might take a decade. So what are some challenges and successes you've seen as you've been doing this?
Okay, some of the challenges were who do we bring into the cooperative? How do we convince our shareholders out there to come and be a part? As we all know, in Africa, in the African setting, we do susu. We haven't, done something like this before. So it was kind of tough for us. But I have my team, probably I would say like 5 strong business women. We got together when I brought up the idea of cooperative. What we did our research. I think if in Minnesota, you heard about the Northeast Cooperative. So what I did, I was able to invite one of the shareholders there, the board members, who were very instrumental in coming to talk to the 5 women team in the front. So we had a Zoom meeting with them. But with theirs, their cooperative is from the community. It's not business leaders. They were able to convince the community to save those businesses in the area when things were going down. But for us now, it was kind of a different setting. You got 5 business women trying to convince over 50 business women to come together. So what we did at first, we had to get more details on how cooperative work. A person from Northeast sent us few information, things that we could go over. We did that as leaders for the cooperative. Then we reached out to over 50 women because the network, we got over 50 women part of the network. So we reached out to the network, but we were able to convince 30 women, because we 30 in numbers, that part of the cooperative. Everybody didn't join us, but we were able to convince a good number of women, like I said, 30 women. So it was not easy to take time to explain to those women that, hey, this is not susu. It's going to take us 3 to 5 years before getting things done. So when you put your money in, you're not going to get it anytime soon. But just look at this as an investment, not only for you, but for the generation after you. So we started with Zoom meeting. My co-chair and I, what we would do research, and most of those meetings, we would just do a few presentations to the group about investment. And so we were able to convince people. Then out of the 31 women, only one person dropped. They said no, they were businesswomen. They cannot keep their money in a space for a long time. So they withdrew from the cooperative. The rest of the women, we were able to convince them through our daily meeting, and we were very transparent. At meeting, we showed the bank account, who are putting money in there before we make any decision. We got those women really involved. I think it brought that trust, and they were convinced in the end that, yeah, this is transparent. This is what we're doing, and we're doing it not only for ourselves, but for our future generation. So it was all about generational wealth and not only our businesses. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just like listening as I'm like thinking about the piece around, engaging and identifying members, because that has been very similar for us too in our journey for Zeal. I think for at least I'll say for myself, I'm thinking about the other worker owners and the conversations we've had around the co-op. Um, I think for us, we had to get clear about what are we inviting people into, what's gonna engage them and really want for um, them to participate in ways that are going to be fulfilling and nourishing to them, and I think we're still figuring that out. I think we've learned a lot much more, and I think we're better at our invitation, for sure. But I will say in the beginning, it wasn't easy. I think we did spend a lot of time on our operating agreement for the cooperative and our bylaws, speaking of governance, and I think with that, I think one of the challenges is, I think we mentioned this also leading up to this call, the decision-making power of the members, getting really clear as you're coming into the co-op, what's the ladder of participation of decision-making power, and how does one have a clear on-ramping to becoming a worker owner. And through working and being a part of the cooperative, where are there opportunities for people to practice that? I think that was one of our early challenges. I think in this first initial 4 years of the cooperative. And then I would say, also what is true inside of that, sometimes within the challenges, you also will find the successes. So I think our studio incubator program that we've been piloting for the past 3 years is what informs our membership now within the cooperative. And a lot of that is focused, while it's on personal development as an artist, as a creative, and thinking about your dreams, goals, aspirations, as far as your finances go, your health, your friends, your family, your community, and all of the ways that you want to show up in your leadership in that way as a creative. I think the most powerful thing about that development process, that leadership development process in the cooperative, has been the opportunity for artists to practice accountability with each other through collaboration and creation of work. So I'm really proud of folks like Eileen Etzel Mena, Devin B. Johnson, who are our former studio incubator participants. They're just examples, but I'm really proud of all of our previous and current members, because of the work that they've been able to produce and the ways that it's made impact on society. And whether that was, having your artwork be filtered on an episode of Insecure, to utilizing your work to be in a commercial where you got the opportunity to be able to show your gifts, your multi-talented gifts, whether that was DJing or being able to host community conversations about economic justice in Black communities. I'm just really proud of how our members have been able to show up for one another in that regard, and to be able to support each other in making their dreams happen. I think that's probably one of the main successes and conditions for satisfaction I can point to from the members who have been a part of Zeal on this now going on 5-year journey.
Great, thank you so much. I'm looking at Liana because I believe it is your turn.
Thank you. All right, our next question is around conflict. We know this work is hard, it can be messy. So just wanting to ask about, what is an example of a conflict that you faced in your cooperative work, and how did you work through it? And anyone can jump in.
Should I go this time with you?
Yeah, let me go this time. I'll be high energy.
Like, oh, who wants to go in? Who wants to jump into
Yeah,
the
you can go
conflict
ahead.
one first? Yeah, I think that I'll preface this by saying that I think that yeah, cooperatives are not new. And like, I think as technology is rapidly advancing and we're all trying to figure out the ways that we're able to sustain our businesses, we should expect to hold a container for conflict when it comes. So I always say, not if it comes, when it comes. When it comes, how can we be prepared? And also, how can we mitigate it as much as possible in the kind of um, 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 front loading around the development of our organization. So what I would say is, I think for Zeal, um, what I've pointed to earlier in terms of our operating agreement, we do have a restorative action process for our membership. And there are moments where, again, in our 4 years, where that process, as we've iterated it, had some kinks that we needed to work out and didn't work to our satisfaction. We've had situations where members may have gotten in very sticky situations of conflict of interest because, artists who are doing work, obviously through the cooperative, we want to be able to encourage collaboration as much as possible. And then there are moments where they may find those opportunities through the cooperative, but they're not actually crediting the cooperative in terms of actual citation, and things of that nature, but then also financially through the cooperative as well. We have like an 8% that we always put back into the cooperative as a regenerative action financially for the co-op. So we've had those moments where we've had to have, very difficult conversations with members about what it means to actually practice cooperating, and where there may be issues of individualism at play. So we've had that very early on. And I think what we've had to do to make clear that we want to mitigate that at all costs is to really break down, like, what does it mean to ensure that we're able to have transparent communication so that we're aware of all the different contracts, consulting work that we are all engaged in, from a place where we really want to support each other and less about competition. I think sometimes that can breed fear, but also, I think, let's be real, it can also reinforce these dynamics around scarcity, that there's not enough for everybody to be able to, make a living and to be able to sustain themselves. And sometimes there is this kind of false belief that creeps up that, if I actually collaborate, there'll be less for me. So, I want to acknowledge that. And so it's been work to be able to put those conversations on Front Street and have those difficult conversations. And I think manage expectations, in the very beginning, in terms of when our members receive resources, whether that's like grants. Some of our co-op members have received grants of, sizes that they've not been able to get before. And so what's the process of one being able to get those resources and use them as an opportunity to gain more resources to sustain their work? And so those have been very early lessons that we've had to learn the hard way, because you can get a grant for $10,000, $15,000, but how do you take that opportunity and make that into $50,000 for the thing that you really need? And for some of our members and partners, some of them have brick and mortar galleries. Some of them are working in community and on grassroots efforts, thinking about commercing and merchandising of Black art. And so I think the other piece it's less about the financial literacy I would challenge, and it's more about what is our relationship to this economic system and how are we going to work in ways, as mentioned earlier, that are truly about investment and regenerative financing, so that we can sustain our institutions, because that's been a long challenge that's already been depicted in collective courage around the sustainability of our businesses at the threat of many structural vehicles of oppression that have the opportunity to shortchange, exploit, extract from us. So I would name that those are the things that Zeal has gone through, and I think we've mitigated the conflict by trying to have direct conversations, managing expectations around code of conduct based on our operating agreement. I feel like that's been our Bible, and then I think what the other piece has been is sometimes we've had to end relationships because of repeated non-compliance. And I think sometimes we allow for people to stay too long. And in the end, what it does, it disrespects the actual code of conduct that we've established. And it also allows for other people to undermine it. So we get to have a threshold for that too in our cooperative spaces if we're expecting to maintain a culture of solidarity and cooperation. So those are some key things that I'll take away from how we've been able to navigate conflict in ways that as we practice, we become better at those things too.
Thank you, Ellen.
Okay, let me just come in. For our cooperative, we haven't had any major conflict. And one of the things that got us, to be very successful with the cooperative, we ensure that we are very transparent with everything that we do. We are governed by our bylaws. We share everything with all the members. All the members has voting rights. We do meetings twice a month. We've got board meetings and general meetings. So we try to be as much as transparent to the shareholders. So shareholders believe in us. So we haven't had really any major conflict yet. Like I said, we just purchased our first property. We're still working on, we just set up our management team to work together with Acer, for another management team that is managing the property. So we stay in that process of really building the cooperative. We're being very transparent with our members. Everything we do, we share emails, we put it on the chat room. So I think that kept us going. And with all our business leaders, we got a 9-member board team that help with the decision-making of the cooperative. So we just have been fun. We haven't had any major conflict, like I said, at the early stage. After 1 year, we had only one member that withdrew from the cooperative. So it has been good so far. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. I just want to make some space for North Stars if you have some questions that you'd like to ask our panelists. I saw someone clap earlier in reaction to some conflict things. If you want to maybe make some comments, you're more than welcome to now, or we have some other questions as well.
Hi, this is Claire from Sisters. Alan, what you were saying was so on point about having the bylaws and the rules and stuff and making sure that people adhere to them. And if if you see something, a pattern coming up from particular people, you make sure you nip that in the bud. It's something that we're seeing. We've seen a lot crop up, and that we've had to make, well, my daughter and I call executive decisions.
Yep.
To really nip things in the bud, and it's not easy because then you're thinking we have to talk a lot about it between us because it's just the two of us, and because you don't want to do it in such a way that the person will go out and do this kind of public thing on your cooperative or whatever, right? So you have to think deeply about it, and We've had situations where we had to decide, we worked with someone and we had to decide if we were going to still pay them even though they did something that was not right. And we decided, you know what? We're gonna pay them because it's better to pay them than to have to deal with the fallout from. So sometimes you got to make these decisions.
And then we still addressed it.
And then we still addressed it. We still addressed it with them, but we said, okay, we pay them and we addressed it at the same time. And we moved on and we haven't had any difficulty with that person, but we looked at that person's personality and the way how they were behaving. And we said we could have trouble that could impact our larger vision. So we made the decision to just pay them. And it was something we just said, okay. And so it's things you gotta make choices like that I realize. So what you were saying, those laws are so important. Having that foundational thing is really important because it guides you. So I thought that was really good advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And for full transparency, we just updated our operating agreement just 2 weeks ago. And that was after a 6-month-long conversation with our members. What is it? If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go together, you will go slow. If you go slow, you will go together. You can go further, in fact. And I would say the operating agreement was actually the very first key documents that the co-op created, even before we obtained our legal status. And I have to shout out the people at Now It Takes Root. I think it's at the Urban Justice Center in New York City, and folks like Julian Hill, who supported us in making that key decision. Because sometimes people just start, right? It's like, let's just go and start and let's get the cooperative going. We'll handle the bylaws later. And for us, it was like, let's go ahead and do these bylaws right now. Let's do the operating agreement right now. Because when in doubt, anytime we've dealt with a situation of conflict, we just refer back to that. It's like, what does this say? Okay, you have missed 2-3 meetings. Hey, we need to have a conversation. And it's less about you being in the wrong, and it's more like, hey, what's happening with you? Like, we've noticed we've not seen you in a while. What's happening? That way we can open up the dialogue and we don't have to be pointing fingers and replicating the trauma triangle. We, especially Black people, have gone through enough trauma, right? So like, it's unnecessary for us to be with each other that way, and I think it helps us, especially in lessening the opportunity for us to manufacture conflict and rather be stewards and a channel for what it means to just belong with each other. Because we're already interdependent as human beings. I think what colonialism and the legacy of slavery has done with us is that it severs our memory of our innate interdependence with each other and our ability to collaborate as indigenous peoples, because at the end of the day, we are indigenous to Africa, so we are all brothers and sisters. And so if we, and with our siblings, all of us belong to each other. So when we treat each other like that, our come from of when situations don't happen, when situations happen that are not in integrity, we can actually approach the issue with integrity. We don't have to come at each other, because the energy that we come at each other is really important. And I think I've learned that because, I know I can be harsh at times too, and in my approach. And so I've also had to learn that. Sometimes it's better, if there's a bee, you attract bees with what? Honey, and so that has been a mantra within our value set around love, around grace, especially the practice of grace. Grace doesn't mean you step on my neck. What grace is about is inviting people into their own ability to practice setting boundaries, because the boundaries are for them. It's not for you. You have your own boundaries. But if we all practice our boundaries, then we will be better in terms of our collaboration together. So, I really appreciate that share from your experience, because those executive decisions help practice other members in being executives of their own lives, and I think because of the transatlantic slave trade, we have been stripped of that. our ability to be the executive decider and collectively practice what it means to do that.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too, one small point before you move on is what we do is like, what we did is we have the laws and then we send them out to everybody, look over these, and if you agree with them before we start, sign off. And then they sign off, and then if anything rises up and say, look, you signed off this, you knew, and you have that to go back to. So yes, thank you again.
Yeah, let me just, in addition to that, yeah, and that's the way to do it. Because what the operating agreement or the bylaws do, it helps to guide the business. In any business, you got to have a plan and stick with that plan, and that plan help guide you. So before any members can be a part of that cooperative, you have to read those rules and guidelines and put your signature to it. So in most of the time I see businesses or cooperative, one of the things we learn from North is, yeah, they send us everything and help guide us. So that made us to be very successful in this cooperative. So we do have our rules and our guidelines, and we stick to it. We just remind members of those rules and guidelines and want people to adhere to it, and it will really help. It will really help. Even what we did, even we had a corporate lawyer to look at our rules and guidelines. Where members have questions, we discuss those questions, we answer them, and make sure that people were comfortable with our rules and guidelines before becoming members. So it's very important for any organization to avoid conflict.
Thank you.
you.
We have like 2 minutes, so I'm gonna open space for one final question, or we can get some final thoughts. I just want to check if anyone has a final question. Okay, seeing none, just some final thoughts as we hop off. I just wanted to know, like, if there was like one thing that you would emphasize over and over again. As you were all talking, I was thinking of Dr. Jessica Gordon Emhart and how she emphasizes the importance of like membership education for the very purposes of the bylaws and governance and making sure that members always know what is expected of them. But as you've been creating your cooperative, like, what is one thing that you feel like you will always emphasize and make sure that people don't forget is of importance?
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. I'm actually going to shout out one of our worker owners who heads up our membership in creative talent development, Ty White. You know, she constantly reminds me in her practice and approach what it means to practice restoration with our members. And that is a part of member education. That's part of the leadership development of our members. And she's constantly done it in every single moment of conflict. Any major situation that has happened, she has been a wonderful model of what it means to practice grace and create space for a restorative process for people to actually ask what happened, how did it impact us, and what do we want to do differently? Those 3 questions have been like golden for the cooperative to come out of situations on the other end of it, as folks mentioned on the call, where there isn't this sense of retaliation that needs to happen in punishment. It's been mitigated really at all costs. And I think because of it, it's been able to preserve the cooperative in such a way that it can actually be on the path of sustainability, which is really key for all of us. So I'll leave that as my final words. And just thanks.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Okay, I would say communication. Keep the shareholders informed of the day-to-day activity of the cooperative. Transparency. Another thing, yeah, networking event where you can always bring someone to motivate the investors. So we do 3 to 4 networking event in a year. Just we'll bring a speaker to talk to members about investment and why people should invest. Yes, just keep spreading the message out there to members. Let them know that and encourage them to continue to invest.
Great. Thank you so much. So grateful for you and all the wisdom that was given in the space today. If I could get some thank yous from the North Stars or reactions, yeah, thank you for taking time with us to share. Super grateful, and thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Nice meeting you.
everyone.
Bye.
All right, take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
You too.
You too. Thank you.
All right. It's been a very long day. I don't know where everyone's at, but we're maybe gonna take 2 minutes just to take some breaths and then come back and do some small group discussions, just kind of like reflecting on the day. So maybe coming back at 1:24, and then we'll do group breakouts with some questions in the chat.